You've likely heard of Jesus Christ, and you probably have some theories or conclusions about who he is or was, and if you do, then you're not alone in that. Through the centuries, many rationalizations have been offered about Jesus in attempts to make him more palatable. When Christianity emerged 2,000 years ago, so did a swarm of interpretations of this new religious movement and the person of Jesus, which have persisted to present day. One of the earliest was Gnosticism, in which a variety of interpretations of Jesus' life and teachings were promoted. Gnostics believed that matter, including the body, was evil and corrupt, and so they carried this interpretation to the person of Jesus, believing that he was merely a spiritual being and only appeared to be human. This gave way to the opposite teaching by Arius, who said that Jesus was merely human and not divine. By the 17th century, Hermann Samuel Reimarus introduced a theory that Jesus was a violent revolutionary whose aim was to overthrow Roman rule of the Jewish people. By the 18th century, historians like Dupuy claimed that Jesus never existed at all and was only a myth or an amalgamation of myths and earlier religious devotions. Later on, scholars like Burton Mack and John Dominic Crossan insisted that Jesus was an itinerant, wandering moral philosopher. In other words, nothing more than a wise teacher. Some have believed that the focus of Jesus' life was on faith healing. This was popularized by Mary Baker Eddy and the Christian Science movement. What I find interesting about this is that so many thinkers and philosophers, theologians, and historians could look at all of the evidence that represents the life of Jesus and construct a version of him that emphasizes one dominant trait to the exclusion of all others. One person says that he was a human prophet and nothing more, while another insists that he was a divine spiritual being and nothing more. Others say he was a moral teacher, while others say a revolutionary. One says he was a faith healer, the other says an apocalyptic prophet of doom. If each of them can find enough evidence to insist that Jesus was this one thing to the exclusion of all the others, then doesn't that suggest that there's quite a bit of evidence that Jesus was many of those things, if not all of them? I really sympathize with the desire to rationalize Jesus because he's a figure that so many of us would want to claim for our own. But then we come up against the qualities that don't fit our affiliation or ideology. So we try to hamstring him into these narrow visions of who he was, while ignoring all of the evidence that suggests he was way more multifaceted than that. The only version of Jesus that shows a balanced appreciation for the whole portrayal of who he was and what he did is offered in Christianity itself, surprisingly. Christianity offers a Jesus who is a moral and religious teacher, a physical and spiritual healer, a revolutionary preaching a new kind of kingdom, and a figure of mythological proportions. This version depicts a Jesus that is consistent with the full spectrum of evidence that was left behind. It's the most logical understanding of this history-changing person who actually lived in the first century, except for one thing. He claimed to be the Son of God. Now, if that violates all your presuppositions about what is or isn't possible, then in an attempt to protect those assumptions, you have to rationalize Jesus into something that is more narrow and comfortable. And you'll have to be content with the fact that any version of comfortable Jesus will be at odds with the deposit of evidence that was left behind. The shocking alternative to that is a version of Jesus that is uncomfortable and difficult to confine to human explanations. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to try and make one of these videos a few times a month, and hopefully we can get it up to about once a week. And they're going to be about topics that are interesting to me and hopefully interesting to you too. And so if they are, please subscribe and come find me on Twitter and elsewhere, and stay tuned.